Earthquake.
Battle of the Superheroes. Is this the most peak episode of Batman Brave and the Bold? Now, Batman Brave and the Bold is no stranger to paying homage to the Silver Age, and the Bronze Age, and beyond that at times, just everything. At times, this creates these unique fusion moments that have a flair specific to this series. However, of all the episodes, just fully embrace the Silver Age. Battle of the Superheroes may go the hardest. And it's also a bit different from the rest of the series because this episode is focused on Silver Age Superman and his supporting cast. And Silver Age Superman is quite different than the Superman that many know today.
Superman's turned into a real different person.
The Superman of the 50s and 60s was no stranger to pranks, emotional manipulation, and just general outlandish tomfoolery. But over the decades, as things transitioned into the Bronze Age, and especially post-Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, where Superman was given a reboot, that past Superman has not been overly foregrounded. He's more kept in the minds of fans who lived it, or Silver Age enthusiasts, and internet bloggers posting early meme-style content, such as the now archived Super Dickory blog page, RIP Super Dickory. But as for this episode, it just goes for it, featuring a main plot centered around a Superman gone bad, who's doing things like tying bows on bridges to make more traffic. And this episode is absolutely full of references to the brim. It even goes to the Dark Ages, and it just has so much fun with it. There is a lot to discuss, and I'm excited to do so. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's get to it. Now, on this channel, we've actually gone through a bunch of the individual stories that are referenced inside this episode, because some of the moments here are direct cover recreations, and some of the stories contained therein are worthy of their own episodes. There's also a lot of blink and you'll miss it moments in this, and I want to break them down. So because of that, first, let's do a general overview of the episode itself. What's it about in its entirety? Battle of the Superheroes is from the third season of Batman the Brave and the Bold, which initially ran from 2008 to 2011. This episode has the production number of number 5, but it was aired first. The episode with the number 1 production code is Joker, Vile, and the Villainous, but that one aired second, and we've actually talked about it here on this channel. Battle of the Superheroes was written by Stephen Melching and directed by Ben Jones. It has a King Tut teaser with lots of odes to Batman 66. This teaser was actually swapped from another episode because this one was running long. You also in that teaser, aside from King Tut and all of those things, the Adam West and Burt Wardness of it all, you get to see a Golden Age style Vicky Vale. However, we'll leave that for now because there's so much to tackle in the main part of this episode, the meat. As mentioned, this is a very Superman outing. Batman is more like a guest star, and it is largely a vehicle to make every Superman reference they could. Superman is just off being the Man of Steel when a crime is committed and Batman arrives so that they can team up and deal with it together. Rare minerals are being stolen and the next target is in Metropolis. The two of them team up, and since they like working together, they decide to keep it going for a while longer. Their team up is also accompanied by Lois writing a piece about a day in the life of Superman.
Superman, a hero for all times, by Lois Lane.
So we have lots of frames to showcase just different aspects of what Superman is doing. However, it's here where the trouble starts, when her and Jimmy get a mysterious gift, which for the viewer is obviously red kryptonite. And when Superman encounters it, he has a personality shift, and now he becomes dark, petty Superman. Pettier Superman. As Superman becomes a tyrant and people start to rise against him, Batman must race to save Superman's reputation and try not to die in the process.
I'm not your enemy, Superman. All who oppose me are my enemies.
Superman nearly crushes his head while they're fighting. Also, I guess he has to save Metropolis and the world, but Superman's reputation. Now, once the effects of Red K wear off, as they do, the world's finest, and Jimmy and Lois can go and confront the villain of this episode, who is Lex Luthor. On his face, it sounds like a very standard episode. And lots of the plot beats are, but what elevates it is how they're executed and all of the numerous references and jokes and how well they land.
No autographs.
So now let's go through and highlight what's there. The episode opens with something that was incredibly common in the Silver Age, and that was Superman's closest friends constantly trying to discern his secret identity. Jimmy is abusing the signal watch Superman gave him for emergencies. The signal watch debuted in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen #1 in 1954. He's summoning Superman to pretend that he's dying, and he only has one last dying request.
Doctors say I don't have much time.
Is there anything I can do? With my super speed, I can fetch a cure from any hospital in the world or find some medicine in a tropical rainforest.
This moment is one of those direct cover references. This is recreating Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen 121 from 1969 and the story Jimmy Olsen's Death Trick. It's by Leo Dorfman with art by renowned Superman artist Kurt Swan, who gets a nod in this episode through the mayor of Metropolis, who when Superman's under the influence, he overthrows, and he's Mayor Swan. We're going to be going through a lot of these, so I may not say every writer and artist's team, but I'll try and put them on the screen for you so you can know. Now, the actual story that this is recreating the cover of is even more manipulative inside, because in that one, Jimmy actually is dying for a bit at least. And so Superman tells him who he is, and after Jimmy recovers, he gets jealous and a whole bunch of things and ends up trying to ruin Clark's life.
Jimmy, please don't unmask Superman. His whole career is at stake.
Ha, listen to that rat beg. Sorry, but when I think of how he knifed me by picking another partner before I even died, I see red. This episode takes a much more playful approach to what is going on.
By the way, my super senses tell me your vital signs, metabolism, and organs are all completely normal. I think you'll make a full recovery.
Now, Jimmy had recovered by the time that Superman told him in 121, and so this is kind of playing with that because he tells him that he can see that he's fine, which is one of the things that one would assume that Superman would be able to tell. And also, aside from being a really fun and memorable cover, this is also a story that features Red Kryptonite in a way, because Superman pretends that he was under the influence of Red K, and that's why he told Jimmy his identity, but it wasn't true. He's not Clark Kent. Clark has glasses. In the Silver Age, these incredibly devious plots are played off as shenanigans. And this episode does capture that tone and how Superman reacts to this trickery. Now, as Superman leaves, he utters his up, up, and away line.
Up, and away!
He started saying that in the radio show of the 1940s so that people would know when he was flying, because otherwise there wasn't any kind of visual cue to accompany that. It was the radio after all. But this phrase would make its way into the comics because there's always been an interplay between adaptation and the comic world. You also have the people in Metropolis saying, look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane.
It's Superman!
This also came from the radio show, but would then be utilized in the Fleischer cartoons as part of the intro.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
And Superman and Batman meet up in this because of the rare mineral heist. They have their friendly dynamic.
Batman, what brings you to Metropolis?
A series of rare gem thefts from museums in Gotham, Bloodhaven, and Star City.
It's not a nod or anything. I just like how they animate Superman's X-ray vision. It's a nice compliment to how they animated his heat vision later. Now, who is robbing the Hall of Minerals? Lex Luthor, who also kidnapped Lois, as you do. The vehicle he's flying looks like a Lexified version of the Supermobile, in that the colors are Lex's colors, the green and the purple. The Supermobile made its first appearance in 1978. This craft debuted in Action Comics 481. In the story, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a marketing it's the Supermobile. The Supermobile is a plane with his powers that he's using to fight Amazo so Amazo can't steal his. Only $9.99. Well, it was only $9.99 when it came out in 1984 as a toy. Lex did have the Lexor, which looks different than what we see in the episode. Lois throws herself out of the plane to escape Lex, which is just a standard maneuver for her in the Silver Age. She's hoping Superman will catch her, but alas, her hopes are dashed.
Oh, Batman. Gee, thanks.
One thing this episode also does is subtly highlight how powerful Superman is, and the way he smashes the Lexmobile to pieces with one punch. Roger Rose is voicing Superman here, and he does a great job because you get to hear a whole range and nuance. He's essentially playing three different Supermen. You get the heroic Superman, you get Clark Kent, and then you get the later Red K influenced Superman, who's darker. You get to see him as Clark very briefly when he makes an appearance at the Daily Planet to beg off writing the Day in the Life of Superman story.
I was hoping I could finish work on my story about Metropolis's best cannolis.
I mean, I kind of want to know where the best cannolis are. With Lex captured, Superman and Batman go off solving crimes and fighting crime together. And this has the backdrop of Lois writing about how amazing Superman is for her day in the life of story. This also is a way to show that time is passing. So who do they fight? Well, they fight Metallo, the Roger Corben version. He was the brother of John Corben, the original. And this one has a more robotic looking costume. He's a Bronze Age creation debuting in Superman 310 from 1977. He didn't have that full look there in that issue, but he gets there. Just in general, everything that's being shown for the most part can be traced back to the Silver Age, the giant fortress key, the bottle city of Kandor, and an actual small little bottle. It's one of those things that's a treat for fans of this era, or it's just maybe cool for people to see who may not have been aware of some of these things. Because everybody's coming into these shows and adaptations and comics from different vantage points with different experiences. For some, it's their first time. For others, it's a nice throwback. Superman and Batman also visit the bottle city of Kandor. And there you see there's this Jimmy looking guy they're fighting. This is a deep cut. It appears to be to Elgar Kur, who's from Action Comics 253 from 1959. his one appearance in the Silver Age. In the story, The War Between Superman and Jimmy Olsen. In that, Elgar Kur is a criminal from Kandor who escapes from prison and switches positions with Jimmy, and that's how he has powers up there, because he's Kryptonian. Once I smash this jar and my machine along with it, I become free to continue my plans to rule the Earth. None will ever know I'm not Jimmy Olsen.
But I know.
The costume is admittedly a different color, but the design is the same and the look is the same. Now, I don't think that Krypto is an obscure note by any means, especially not time of recording, but it's always just nice to see the best boy of steel, and it's fun to see him catch a frisbee in space. Krypto used to have a lot of adventures on his own in the Silver Age, and sometimes he would go to space and travel out there. He lived an exciting life. Now, there's also a Mixie sighting.
Mr. Mixia's Pitlick.
Superman and Batman! What fun!
He animates the Daily Planet logo and sends it rampaging. And in this sequence, the amount of Jimmy references they get in, it's impressive. We have a whole video on this channel. Jimmy Olsen transforms into stuff, and they hit most of the ones that were in that video. Also, that's just one of my favorite videos I've ever made, so I'll link it down below. So let's see, we'll go in order. You've got the Freak Edition from Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, number 59. From the story, Jimmy Olsen, Freak, where he's briefly made to look like that by the jealous husbands of an alien princess who has chosen Jimmy as the latest man to add to her harem. He was super into marrying her until he learned that there were 4 other guys. Next, we have Jimmy, the human octopus. This is from Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen 41. The story, The Human Octopus, where it may or may not have been a drug-induced hallucination that Superman was playing along with. The next one is not a transformation story, but it is a classic cover, and it's Jimmy marrying a gorilla. This is from issue 98, and the story is The Bride of Jungle Jimmy, and arguably the funniest part of the cover is Superman's dialogue.
Sorry, Jimmy, but as local witch doctor, I now pronounce you man and wife.
That story is a lot of a lot. On the one hand, you're dealing with some peritypical stereotyping, and on the other, it's pulling from some popular classic films like King Kong, which some may feel means the same thing. This sacred ape has watched too many giant ape movies and so falls in love with Jimmy. Next is Jimmy Olsen turning into a genie. Now, turning into a genie happened to more than one DC character in the Silver Age, or they would encounter them too. That was also a thing. This is from Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 42, and the story Jimmy the Genie, where Jimmy accidentally awakens an ancient genie because he has a toothache. And also, then Jimmy becomes a genie, also by accident, and then he's tasked with killing Superman. So, a typical Tuesday. Next, there's Wolfman Jimmy, and this is one of the more well-known transformations, and it happened to him twice. We've done vids on both times. The first is issue 44, The Wolfman of Metropolis, where Jimmy drinks a Wolfman potion that Superman leaves with him. It's an accident, he was eating a sandwich, he needed a drink, it was right there. And then, he transforms into a Wolfman at night, and can only be cured by the willing kiss of a woman. They highlight willing. And as a result, this is the issue that features the panel with Jimmy in a kind of woman of the night scenario. That night, after the moon rises, "Look, miss, all this money is yours if you'll just kiss me once." Ow!
Who would kiss a monster like you? Help, police!
The next time it happens is issue 52, where he ends up as the Wolfman again in a jealous vengeance plot by Mixie. And he also gets to kiss all of Superman's love interests and ex-girlfriends, and also Lucy. The next you see in the episode is Bizarro Jimmy. Superman's supporting cast turning into Bizarros was also a thing that happened. This is from Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 80. And on the cover, he looks super happy. I hope that doesn't mean he's actually very depressed. Next, we have Big Head Jimmy, or Super Brain Jimmy. And that means he's super intelligent. And that means, of course, as is par for the course with those type of stories, that he's become extremely mean. This is from Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 22. And here, he quickly learns Superman's identity and proceeds to be awful about it. They try and explain it away at the end, but even so, there is no more time to waste. I cannot tell you my secret purpose, but I now command you to do certain super jobs for me.
You command? What if I refuse?
Superman gets his answer via silent telepathic message. You can't refuse. I also have X-ray vision, and I see, hidden within a secret pocket of your cape, the clothing of Clark Kent. Obey me or else. Wow, he must have super folding. He's crushed that really flat. Also, this is why Superman can't tell Jimmy his secret identity. Now, the last one we see in this sequence is Human Porcupine Jimmy. And this is from Superman's pal 65, where he gets turned to a porcupine-human fusion by Mixie's girlfriend, Miss Gspitzen, because he says he'd rather marry an animal than her. All strong and enduring choices when it comes to Jimmy transformations. And the fact that they're part of the Mixie sequence is a bonus, because some of them feature him. And it's also just something that you can see happening. It works in terms of the episode. It doesn't feel out of place. You also in this episode get to see Superman being clever, because he has to, of course, get the imp to say his name backwards.
Knock, knock.
A joke? I love jokes. Who's there?
Kill Tipsy'sm.
Kill Tipsy's and who?
And just like the classic Silver Age tales, when he's gone, returned back to the fifth dimension, what he's done, the damage he's wrought, it's undone. And in some stories, people didn't even remember it. Now, this scene is far briefer than it is to describe, but if you're familiar with the history, it's just so fun. Now, it's from this point in the episode where the conflict really picks up, because this is where Jimmy and Lois get the gifts. Lois gets a necklace and Jimmy gets a brand new signal watch that's all blinged out. Now, many of these moments are surrounding these two, and there's a reason for that. Thanks to the George Reeves live action series in the 50s, both characters really leaped up in popularity, particularly Jimmy. He was the first to get his own series, with Superman's Pal, which launched in 1954. And it ran till 1974, and it ended up being 163 issues. And at the end of it, it didn't really end, it was rolled into Superman Family. Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane started a bit later in 1958, but it went on for 137 issues and then was also rolled into the Superman Family book. And in 1962, it was the third best-selling comic behind Superman and Superboy. So there was a time when supporting civilian characters could not only sustain their own books, but thrive. And this episode and the way they're used is kind of paying tribute to that. Also, they just have a lot of cheeky wordplay in there.
Look, I got one too. From my pal Jimmy.
This scene has even more direct cover references. When Lois fantasizes about being married to Superman and having 2 super kids, that's a recreation of the cover from Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane 23 and the imaginary story The Wife of Superman, which is actually one of the stories that was chosen for the 75th Lois Lane anniversary celebration book. And years later, in 2006, it got assigned as happening on its own Earth. This was during Infinite Crisis, and so some say it's not an imaginary tale anymore, although others will of course say, aren't they all? It's actually a deeper story than the cover lets on, with Lois having to deal with feelings of inadequacy as a stay-at-home housewife and missing her career as a reporter. Now, what Jimmy thinks about when he gets his gift is the iconic Jimmy transformation, even more so than the Wolfman, and that is Turtle Man Jimmy Olsen.
I warned you not to experiment with that growth ray. It's turned you into a super menace, and now I must remove you from the Earth.
This is the cover of Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen number 53, and the story is The Giant Turtle Man. We've done a whole video on this one. I'll link it down below. But this transformation and the Wolfman, they're up there and they get referenced more than once. And this Turtle Man one is actually being used as the cover for a DC's Finest edition. However, this original 1961 cover from the Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen is itself a reference to something else. And that's the pulp issue of Thrilling Wonder Stories from July of 1940, which Mort Weisinger edited when he worked in the pulps. And sometime after he worked there, he came to DC, and he was the editor at the time of that issue of Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen. And one of the things he implemented was that he would sometimes come up with the cover first and then stories would come after, and that was something that was picked up by other editors going forward. It's all connected. Now, Superman is battling Toyman, who's robbing a bank, and he's once again shown to be very powerful. It's this interesting juxtaposition of the shenanigans and jokes with just how truly mighty Superman is. It's well done because it doesn't seem out of place or it doesn't draw too much attention to itself, so it doesn't feel dangerous or important until he flips.
I'm sick of these penny ante crooks thinking they can steal from my city. It's time I made an example of one.
This episode also, just in general, it has really good facial animations. The series does on the whole, but sometimes you don't get to appreciate them as much in the main character because Batman's masked so much of the time, but you really get to see it here with Superman, especially in the eyebrow work. In general, this series just had very smooth, expressive lines, although the style wasn't for everybody. Now, corrupted by Red K, Superman goes full jerk mode, ruining people's beach days, putting kittens in trees, being a Silver Age level menace, at least at the start. Aside from that mild attempted murder, he could have tried to murder them all, but that's not the Silver Age thought pattern. That's not how those stories go. Now, of course, this is too much for Jimmy. He's taken down all his posters, stomping them. He doesn't want to be associated anymore. It's a scene that's reminiscent of one from King Superman, which will be more overtly referenced shortly. Only in that story, it's the members of the Jimmy Olsen Club doing the destruction. As Superman's pal, but also as a well-known boy reporter, Jimmy Olsen had his own fan club. You get another reference while he's tearing down these posters and talking to Batman, which we did a full video on, and that's the cover of Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen number 30, a story where Superman adopts Jimmy, and he does indeed destroy the present from him. Now, in the episode, Batman has begun to figure out what is going on. Since he is aware of the existence of Red K, it doesn't appear that other people are, except for the villain, who will be revealed later.
May I borrow it?
You can keep it. Superman is no pal of mine.
He also goes to Lois, where we get another cover recreation, this time to Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane 26, which while the cover makes it seem like Superman is betraying Lois, inside the story that's actually happening is an imaginary story about Superman marrying Lana Lang, and their marriage falling apart at the end because she's more powerful than him because she has all his powers, he gives her superpowers, but then she's not vulnerable to kryptonite, and neither of them can live with the fact that she's more powerful than him. It's a fascinating time capsule. We also did a full episode on it. Also, in the context of Battle of the Superheroes, it leads into one of the funniest jokes, especially if you've read a lot of Lois Lane comics.
It serves you right, Lois. After all the love schemes you pulled to get me to marry you.
I have no idea what he was talking about.
It works because either this seems wildly out of character for Lois, or if you've read a lot of those stories, you know it's entirely in character and she knows exactly what she was doing. She's probably plotting a marriage scheme that moment. Now Batman has to go and confirm his hypothesis, which means he has to confront Superman, and their confrontation is actually pretty tense.
Overnight, you've turned into a rude, selfish, sadistic creep.
How dare you speak to me like that? Get out before I throw you out, old chum.
The build up to the climax is fun and clever, in that in a way it mirrors the evolution of comics themselves, going from the more lighthearted shenanigans to a brutal drag-down knockout fight, referencing one of the comics said to have been part of launching the Dark Age. And it builds up to it. Firstly, you have Superman taking over Metropolis, in a reference to the King Superman plot from Action Comics 311 and 312, but 311 is the cover that is actually recreated inside the episode. And that story was also a Red K story, in which Superman was split into two, a bad Superman and a good Clark, or so it seemed at the start. Superman had powers, Clark didn't, and Superman went to the UN and demanded to be made king of Earth. When we discussed it, some called it Silver Age injustice.
Citizens of Metropolis, I am in charge now. Kneel before King Superman.
Kneel before Zod!
Now we go from that to Batman showing up in armor from The Dark Knight Returns from 1986 by Frank Miller. And as mentioned, some feel that is one of the comics that helps launch the Dark Age. And you get a climactic battle that mimics the one from those stories. And some of the frames in the fight are very reminiscent of the paneling from that last issue. It just shows that everything's interwoven. It's this representation of how all these comic eras are linked and inform each other, and are also entertaining in their own ways. Also, they do some nice things to convey Superman's arrogance, and again, they're subtle, such as how he doesn't walk anymore. When Batman comes to see him, he hovers and then flies down. He never actually comes down to his level anymore, whereas at the beginning of the episode, he walked. It's just a nice little detail to convey his shift in attitude. Now, the fight is to stall for time, because classic Red K has a time limit. In this episode, they go with 24 hours, but it could also be 48, sometimes it was 72, but the point is it wore off. Also, the rule with original Red K was that it would impact him differently each time, and it couldn't have the same effect. But becoming bad was one of the things that did happen to him. But because of when this episode aired, many made the association with this kryptonite and the Smallville rendition of it, where it would make Clark an edgier bad boy version of himself. It's hard in this episode watching Superman fight Krypto. It's tense. If Krypto gets hurt, we riot. Now the Red K wears off just in time because Batman was about to die, and it's time to get to the true mastermind, Lex. This was a ruin your reputation plot. Also, Lex in this is voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who voiced the Joker on The Batman.
While the effects were temporary, I knew they would be enough to turn the public against you, Superman. Once trust is lost, it can be difficult to regain.
Now, Superman and Batman defeat him by swapping, which is special because this is a deep cut reference. While Superman, Batman, and oft-times Robin would appear on the cover of World's Finest comics together since its start in 1941, the first time they actually teamed up was in World's Finest 71 in the year 1954. And in that, they swap costumes. The story is Batman, double for Superman. And it would go on to be something that they would do fairly frequently. So this solution, it's a nice callback. The real Lex is captured because the Lex they sent to prison was a Lex bot. Also note that in his lair, the statues he had were of Caesar and Genghis Khan. And then the World's Finest are throwing a parade. Also, the World's Finest is on the Daily Planet newspaper. This could be a reference, maybe, the parade part, to World's Finest 218, but that might be a bit of a reach. Also, there might be a better cover. If there is one, let me know. It's a really fun scene with moments like them vaguely wondering where Clark is, and also he's managed to scoop Lois.
I'm sorry for the way I treated you. How will I ever make it up to you?
We can discuss it over a dinner date.
Tell me your secret identity.
The people sure were quick to forgive Dictator Superman. They were in the comic story too. People on this one protested though. That person who threw a tomato at him, nerves of steel. However, this episode ends with the city being menaced by Brainiac and his pet space monkey, Coco. Coco sighting. Brainiac used to have a pet space monkey. Justice for Coco. This episode is amazing. It's a solid episode in its own right that manages to maintain the Silver Age tone and balance it with its at the core fairly serious plot of a Superman gone bad. The jokes work because they can land for people who are familiar with the era they're referencing, or in contrast, the main era with people who aren't familiar with it. If you're a Silver Age comic history fan, particularly of Superman, this is just so much fun. It's a treat, everything about it, the story beats, all the deliberate recreated moments, and just the atmospheric ones, having all those elements of that era in play, but also being able to bring some of the more dark, updated action.
Look at yourself. What would Ma Kent think?
Ma? How dare you?
The way the episode manages to move to a Dark Age style fight in this tone and then shift back without it feeling jarring is not something that's easily accomplished. It comes together to create something that feels unique, even as it's homaging and playing with so much from the past. It's gratifying if you're a fan of these classic stories to see some of it recreated on screen, and just have these moments acknowledged and treated as the foundational building blocks that they are. Superman and his stories, they had a whole era where things like this were going on, and there were tons of fun moments. And there was a lot that had value in it and still served as building blocks. And while there are some moments that don't stand up as much to scrutiny or weren't as good, it's all still part of him. This is the Superman episode of Batman Brave and the Bold, and it goes hard and it makes the most of its time. It gets as much Superman in there as it can. It really does Silver Age Superman justice. It's a glorious episode. Now, of course, it's not going to be to everyone's taste, particularly if you're not a fan of Silver Age Superman. Also, some may not appreciate the references, especially the ones they hold. Some may just not note them, and some they may notice that something is being hinted at, and they may be intrigued to figure out what's going on, but others may be annoyed or just bored or even feel on the outside. Also, some may just find it too silly. Some also just don't like the look of this series, which seeks to imitate older comic art styles, particularly Dick Sprang when it comes to Batman, and there's some Kurt Swan in this episode and how they're handling Superman and Jimmy, but also Lois is very Kurt Schaffenberg-esque because he became the definitive Lois artist in the Silver Age. Again, things you may note if you're fans of this era. Also, I had nowhere to put this, but the robot in the Fortress with the 20 on it, it's a robot from the 1941 Fleischer cartoon, Superman the Mechanical Monsters. I can say that this is my favorite episode of the whole series, and I think it could be argued from a fusion of historical elements and its own plot, the best. Now, of course, you may disagree, and I would love to hear what your favorite episode is and why down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some of your day to spend discussing comics and all of these references with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. There are still some of these that need their own episodes. Dying Jimmy is just a delight. See you again soon. Bye-bye.